Hey everybody, welcome to Ready Set Drone. Today I am here with my good friend Chris, and Chris has some experience flying in cold weather, so we're going to talk about that, so stay tuned. So, this is Chris, who I've known for 10, 15 years, a long time. Chris actually lived in Switzerland for 2 years. Just took a trip to Colorado and happened to fly a DJI Phantom Standard, and as well as a Mavic in some very cold weather, freezing weather. So what's different about flying in cold weather than flying in regular weather?
There's a few things that I learned, and I think that I want to start with the Mavic because that's the most relevant. Number one, I got a number of calibration issues, with the sensors in the front and sensors in the bottom. And so what I had to do before the flights is I had to use DJI Assist to calibrate the sensors. And if you've never used it, I highly recommend that you do a calibration on your drone before you fly.
Okay. So first of all, tell me the scenario. Where were you flying? Was it snowing? Was there snow on the ground? What was the temperature?
Yeah. So if you look at the flights that I took in Switzerland, for our international audience, I'm going to talk in Celsius.
Okay.
So everything was below zero or minus 15 Celsius in Switzerland and in France.
Okay. So pretty cold.
And every time it was snowing.
That's what, about 10 degrees Fahrenheit?
Yeah, about 10 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
It was always snowing. And so when I took out the standard because of the blade structure when we were in Grindelwald, Switzerland, the blades, when we finally landed, they were all frozen, completely caked over. And I was surprised that it kept so steady in such high wind as well as having frozen blades.
So the motors are still turning, but the blades actually have ice on them.
They're completely caked in ice and all the tips.
Okay.
And so when I landed, I was kind of grateful. So that's one thing I understood about that flight. But the same thing, responsiveness was completely different. And so if you take something in warm weather like 50, 60, 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 25 to 35 Celsius, you get a very, very good response. But what I noticed is that in cold weather, the response was very, very different. There was a lot more updrafts, it was more susceptible to updrafts, and I noticed that it had a lot more trouble staying steady.
So what are some things we can do, or some things we can avoid doing to fly in cold? It's cold right now.
Yep.
A lot of people want to fly. What should people be doing?
Yeah. So there's a pretty big list that I've created. So obviously use DJI Assist if you're using a Mavic. Get everything calibrated before you go.
That's also true for the Phantom too, right?
Yes, it's true for the Phantom as well.
Okay.
The second thing is make sure that you have proper touch capacitive gloves. And I see this happening all the time. These people shoot these cold weather videos, but unfortunately they're out there freezing, and they last about 10 or 15 minutes when it's minus 5 or minus 10.
They don't have gloves on.
These are very, very cheap, couple of dollars at Target, and they have a touch capacitive element that'll run on the iPhone or another Android phone.
Okay.
And so you can touch a screen and still have your hands warm.
Okay. Touch capacitive gloves.
Exactly, that's very important.
Or buy them on Amazon.
Yeah.
Link below.
There you go. The next thing, honestly, is make sure that all of your batteries are 100%. Every time I've flown out, the battery length in cold weather is different.
Okay.
Now, very specifically, DJI actually updated their firmware in December for cold weather.
Okay.
So I had to update all of my batteries as well as the firmware on the drone to make sure that everything was good. The same thing,
don't go out with 75% batteries.
No, absolutely.
Because that's really about 50% or
Exactly.
30%. Okay.
The other thing that the real problem was the iPhone. Now the iPhone, regardless of what Apple wants to tell you, their battery issues are far more extensive than just the 6S that they've talked about. I had the same issue with the 6S Plus. My whole family, my wife, my mother, and myself, all had new batteries replaced in our iPhones. Basically what has happened to me in anything below 0 Celsius weather, the phone will be about 65% and just shut down.
Okay.
Now, if you're on the standard, you're in real trouble. So you need to keep that standard in your line of sight. Now, if you're on the Mavic, you have a little bit of a safety guard, and you can just push the go to home button. But it's just a little bit different on the standard. So I highly recommend your batteries will drain twice as fast if you're using your iPhone in the cold. And if you haven't had your battery replaced, go to apple.com, look up your serial number, and then put your serial number in there, and you may be entitled to a free replacement.
Oh, well, there you go. But that's just true for the 6S.
It's true for the 6S, but I've got the 6S Plus. And as I said, I just had this battery replaced, and I think this battery issue is far more pervasive than people let it out to be.
Sure, sure. Apple doesn't want people to know that.
Absolutely not.
All right, so back to the drone, though. You were talking to me earlier about some things with regard to like not leaving the drone in your car overnight, etc.
So you will get a lot of battery warnings if your drone is cold or if your batteries are cold.
Okay.
So one night, I decided to go for a flight. It's been in the car all night. And immediately I'm getting battery warnings, and you know, I'm a little bit paranoid because like if you're getting battery warnings and plus you're in high wind and you're in snow and that sort of thing, you can't really see your drone. So if it goes down, you're going to have a hard time finding it.
Yeah.
So what I did to alleviate this issue is I made sure that one, the drone was exposed to the actual temperature for at least 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
Now on a standard that's more important because the camera and the optics there, they're prone to fog up. And so what I found is that when I was coming in from a warm hotel out into the cold, they would fog up immediately. And it would take another 10 or 15 minutes for them to kind of adjust themselves. Now the Mavic was less of an issue, but I did notice on the Mavic that this particular piece, which I love and hate, on the Mavic is quite brittle. And in cold weather it gets even more brittle. And with just a slight push onto the Mavic, this sucker broke.
Oh, because it was really brittle
Yeah.
from the cold. Well, so let me recap what you're saying here is don't leave your drone in the cold elements overnight where the core temperature of it drops down and it gets really cold. But if you leave it in a warm environment like the hotel room, house, whatever, then you want to take it out for 5 or 10 minutes into the cold before you fly it so that it can acclimate and the fogging can go away.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's more pervasive on the standard than it is on the Mavic. The gimbal cover really helps keep that gimbal a bit warmer than normal.
Okay. Were you flying with that cover on it?
No, in fact, all through Colorado, New Mexico, and the places that I've gone, I haven't had the gimbal cover.
So I will tell you one thing. I've actually seen some videos about this. Oops. This right here.
Yep.
This is actually a air intake.
Yeah.
So with that cover on, you're actually blocking that air intake, and the elements inside here get hotter.
Oh, really?
So if it is warm outside at all, you don't want to fly with that cover on because that blocks this air intake. And I've seen videos where they've measured the internal temperature or measured the heat sink after a flight with and without.
Yeah.
It's significantly hotter. The heat sink gets significantly hotter when you fly with that.
Yeah.
So I would say if it's cold outside, probably doesn't matter that much.
Exactly.
But if it's warm outside, I definitely wouldn't fly with the gimbal cover.
You know, this is another important point. You can order a new gimbal cover, and I ordered 2 of them, and I had DJI credit, so it was basically 0. But you cannot order the gimbal guard from DJI.
Really, the little plastic.
No, you can't order that. So DJI, if you're listening, please, please, please give us a gimbal guard that we can order or include it with the base gimbal.
Yeah, they should come as a package.
Should.
All right, so we've covered kind of the pre-flight. Don't leave it in the car.
Yep.
Take it out. Now, when you get ready to fly, what are some things you should do? Are you wearing your gloves? It's cold outside. You've sat for 10 minutes. What next?
Always IMU, especially if you're in the mountains, as well as the compass. That kind of goes without saying.
So calibrate.
Calibrate. And then just be prepared. If you're running the Mavic and you're using your iPhone in cold weather, be prepared for it to die.
Any other tips for flying in cold weather as far as the Mavic or the Phantom goes?
Well, I think for me it was about distance too. I use a Tracker Bravo, and I'll pop this on the top of the Mavic, or the DJI Standard, or the DJI Professional that I just had and sold. This will allow you, without wireless internet, to actually find a drone. Now, you'll be looking on your map. You'll be able to see at least a proximity, at least within 100 yards of where your drone is falling.
You have to get within a certain distance.
And then you get within a certain distance, and it'll help you find your drone. So
these
are helpful. The batteries run out like crazy, so if you do have a tracker, make sure you have extra batteries and you test this before you go. I bought 10 of them, and I've used them a number of times, but I always have battery issues. I have to check them.
Okay. Well, anything else?
Wear a hat. You know, very important. Good socks.
Heat goes out of your head,
exactly.
especially when you're bald like me.
Yeah, and especially when you lose your drone and that adrenaline starts to fire up.
You're spending time out looking for it, and you're starting to get cold. Your ears are cold. Like, damn it! If I only had a hat.
But flying in cold weather is fundamentally different than flying in warm weather. Everything that you do, you have to be twice as cautious on. When we were in New Mexico, again, it was about -5, and we were flying over a number of rock formations, that sort of thing. Absolutely beautiful. But the temperature variances as we got into the various altitudes was very different.
Well, you got to keep in mind too that it may be a certain temperature at ground level, you know, which is still a high elevation, but when you go up another 300 or 400 feet, it's going to be quite a bit colder.
Yeah, exactly. So I noticed the flight dynamics of the Mavic were very strong, very stable, but you know, you've got high winds, you've got cold weather, and all of these things kind of come into play. But if you haven't gotten a warning, I think the biggest and the scariest thing for me is I kept getting these sensor warnings. You know, like if the sensor is miscalibrated, and using DJI Assist, I had problems with it on my desktop. It simply wouldn't render the pattern for DJI Assist so you could calibrate all the sensors. It only would run on the laptop, and I rebooted and followed all the instructions, but it was a little bit peculiar, and I think that you'll find also that the DJI Assist app is finicky and dependent on your machine and that sort of thing, but you have to be very patient with it. All the instructions and the video tutorials are also in Chinese, so you know, follow the instructions. They're in English on the screen, but the video tutorials are in Chinese.
Okay.
So just be patient with it. It's pretty easy to do once you have all the software working. Just be patient with it, and you should be good.
And we'll do a different video about DJI Assist, just to kind of go in more detail about it. But sounds like, if I was going to recap, the main things for flying in cold weather: gloves with the sensor that will work, or the capacitive touch that will work on your iPhone. Don't leave your batteries out overnight. Don't leave your drone out overnight. Let it stay in a warm location, but when you take it out, let it acclimate. When you turn it on outdoors, I imagine that because there's all the electronics and the heat sink and everything, it actually warms itself up, and the internal components are probably okay because of the battery, the power. But watch for frost on your propellers, because you don't want those things to freeze. It's just like an airplane when they de-ice them before they fly. You don't want these things to crack because of the cold weather. And dress warm and be very cautious flying in the cold.
Sounds good.
Fair enough?
Yep.
All right, thanks for watching Ready, Set, Drone. If you like this video, please comment below and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Thanks a lot.